So we finally got it. Episode 3 of The Last of Us. And this episode was perfect. This was the best episode so far. Can we just take a second to appreciate the level of acting in this episode? Everybody did such a great job. Joel and Ellie are still doing a wonderful job portraying these characters, but Bill and Frank is really where this episode shines. They were the main focus of the episode, and they blew me away. We aren't given a whole lot of time to grow a connection to these characters, but that isn't an issue because I was incredibly moved by their story. Now, admittedly, this is the most that the show has deviated from the game, but like I've said before, in an adaptation, that's not an issue. During this section of the game, you meet up with Bill, but not before maneuvering your way through this town that was rigged with traps set up by Bill. And from here, you go on a quest to fetch a battery, and you learn a little bit about Frank, that he was Bill's partner, and at some point they got into a disagreement and split off and went on their separate ways, eventually learning that Frank dies. And you get the battery in a truck, you go off on your merry way, leaving Bill behind. That's essentially it. But we got so much more in this episode than I could have ever asked for. Not only do we get to see more of Frank and the kind of character that Frank is, we get to see Frank and Bill essentially live out a 16-year-long relationship from beginning to end. And it's heartbreaking. It's beautiful, and it's tragic, and it's heartbreaking. We get to see more of Bill's character. We get to see how he's essentially a doomsday prepper. He's somebody who is excited by the idea that humanity is gone. Now he can be by himself and pretty much just live his best life. Until Frank shows up unexpectedly, and they share a meal together, which eventually leads to them sharing their lives together. It's crazy to see Nick Offerman in this role. It's not something that I'm used to seeing him in, but he did a wonderful job. The fact that he can go from having a hardened lone survivor outer shell to having this sensitive and frightened and caring character underneath, it's just truly outstanding. To see that Frank's character is pretty much the polar opposite of Bill, which we never really got to know much about Frank's character. In the game, you can go around and find letters from Frank, but that only gives you just so much insight. We get to see how these two came in contact with Tess and Joel. It was really nice to see the actress portray Tess one last time. And even though this was mostly a slower episode, there was still quite a bit of action in there. There's a pretty action-packed section where Bill has to fight off some bandits, which ends with another really emotional, touching scene. This episode moved me in a way that was not expected. Now, I've been hyping this episode up since day one without knowing much about it, and it surpassed all expectations. To me, this was a perfect episode in every way. Obviously, set design, cinematography, sound, all of that, perfect. But really, what gets me is that from day one, Neil Druckmann has said that the story of The Last of Us is a story of love and a story of what people will do in order to hang on to that love, the places that it'll take you. And they are able to tell a story that mirrors that perfectly in a condensed 1 hour and 20-minute episode flawlessly. The story of two people who are lost and eventually find each other, are able to bond and love each other and get to the point where they want to protect each other all the way to the very end. And that Shakespearean ending just gave a little nice bow on top of it. Honestly, I prefer this little deviation from the game more than the section that we got in the game. Once again, this adaptation is proving its worth. To me, for an adaptation to be worth it, it has to build upon the world and it has to elaborate on details of the story that we didn't get. Focusing on little sections of the gameplay might make for good gameplay mechanics and work in a game, but in a show, as a writer or a director, you really have to get creative in how you're going to portray that on screen in an interesting way and still be faithful to the source material, and they nailed it. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of fanboy haters that are really pissed off that it isn't a one-for-one remake. If all you wanted is a shot-for-shot recreation, just go play the game. Go watch all the cutscenes on YouTube. You can watch like an 8-hour-long movie of just the cutscenes. But this is a story that we never thought that we would get and never knew that we needed. So much depth was added to Bill's character. And Bill gets an ending, and it's a beautiful ending. There's a shot at the end of the episode that focuses on Joel and Ellie as they drive out of the town, and it pulls back into the window of the room, and I think it's just done beautifully. We were introduced to these characters and we were able to see the life that they lived during the outbreak, and we just get a little bit more insight into how the world was affected by this, which I thought was handled wonderfully. And now the rest of the series, we can focus on the relationship of Joel and Ellie. They're wearing their clothes from the game, and you can see that that note that Bill left for Joel really struck a chord. I think connecting Joel and Bill through the relationships that they have was a really smart idea. Two men that are willing to go to any length to protect what they love and what they have, but maybe from opposite sides of the coin. And I think this episode will really pay off after the season finale. Anyway, that's all I got for this episode. I think it was perfect. It was a 10 out of 10 episode, the best episode of the show that we've gotten so far. And it's really proving that this might be the best adaptation ever. But as always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Step into my room, leave with bloody lips, saying that she loved me but never really did. Maybe I should go, walk over the mountains, find a new home, away from where the town is. I could spend a year alone and never miss a soul. I could try my hardest.